It is officially official. Max Scherzer is heading out of Shea Stadium and Citi Field and heading towards Globe Life Stadium in Arlington, as the Texas Rangers have finally acquired his talent after a couple hours of deliberation on exactly whether this deal would end up going through. It's a lot of speculation on who would end up getting traded. We'll get to that in a second, but it's just official now that Max Scherzer is heading to the Texas Rangers in a deal that is going to really help bolster their rotation, and they're getting a future Hall of Famer to go ahead and try and give them a push towards a World Series this year. It's important to note that he is under contract for $43.3 million per year with a no trade clause, which was thought to be part of the hang up for a little bit. Turns out it was not, but more so that he has an opt out after 2024. The Rangers wanted to make that guaranteed money. They wanted to make sure that at the end of the day, they would be able to have his services and not have to worry about whether he would opt out after 2024. And at the end of the day, he ends up foregoing that option, and now he is staying in Texas for 2024. So it's confirmed he is opting into his player option for the 2024 season. So the Rangers now have 2 years of control for Max Scherzer's services. The important part is Max Scherzer, 3-time Cy Young winner, 8-time All-Star, 2019 World Series winner with Washington, is headed to the Texas Rangers in a deal to really go ahead and give them what they need in the starting rotation to go ahead and make a successful push towards the playoffs and the World Series in 2023. Scherzer is not necessarily having the best year by his standards. For instance, his strikeouts per nine currently sit at 10.11, which is the lowest he's had since 2013, so 10 years ago at this point. But on the bright side, a lot of his underlying numbers, such as ERA, seem to be just a little bit unlucky this year. For instance, his ERA sits at 4.01, but his expected ERA is 3.65. His FIP currently sits at 4.73, so a little bit worse, but his expected FIP is closer to his current ERA at 4.09. He also has a 3.82 SIERA, and his WHIP is still pretty solid at 1.189. So that's a lot of numbers I just threw at you, but basically what that means is he is performing better than what the numbers might suggest. He isn't doing great this year by any means. A lot of these are not at the peak of his career, but again, he's 38 years old. He's not expected to win another Cy Young Award this year, but he is Max Scherzer. He's going to be a great starting pitcher for you in the playoffs. He has the experience, and I think the Rangers are really counting on that experience and the ability for him to just be a solid, not necessarily innings eater, but go ahead and pitch 6 innings in a game, get to the bullpen, and really enhance what needs to be, in the Rangers' case, a World Series contending team, because they're going all in right now. They traded away a top prospect, and we're going to get to that in a second, but there is a lot of stuff to unpack in a mega deal that sends Max Scherzer to the Texas Rangers at the trade deadline in 2023. The Mets were tired with going ahead and dealing with Ronald Acuna. I mean, who wouldn't? He is the former NL Rookie of the Year, 2-time Silver Slugger, whole bunch of accolades coming in later in his career. So they went ahead and got his brother, Luisangel Acuña, from the Texas Rangers in this deal. So now AL East teams have 2 Acuna brothers to worry about coming up very soon. Acuna is a shortstop, but there is some talk he might end up at second base or center field, and I think that's really interesting given the orientation of where the Mets are right now. You have your center fielder in Brandon Nimmo, who I think is going to stay there for a long time. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't. You also have Francisco Lindor playing shortstop and Jeff McNeil playing second base. So Acuna should probably be in the major leagues sometime next year. I don't see exactly where he fits in on this roster. The only real possibility I see is Jeff McNeil moving full-time to right field to accommodate Luisangel Acuna going ahead and playing there. Maybe you see what happens with Acuna in right field, but it's a very interesting trade for the New York Mets. I don't hate it in terms of prospect pedigree. We'll get to that in a second. But let's talk a little bit more about Luisangel Acuna, who, according to MLB Pipeline, is the 44th best prospect in all of Major League Baseball and the 3rd ranked in the Texas Rangers system. He is the definition of an all-around good player. And normally when you think of a good player, you think of nothing great, but Luisangel Acuna has the potential to be a great player. Maybe not what his brother is, but he has the potential to get a couple All-Star game nods, to maybe win a Silver Slugger, maybe win a Gold Glove here and there. He's not going to wow you, but you'll go into his baseball reference page in 15, 20 years when he's retired and say, you know what, this guy was pretty dang good. That's the kind of player I think they're getting back from Max Scherzer, and given that he's 38 and he retained that option, granted they're paying down about $20 million of the contract, a little bit more than that. It's a lot of money, but the Mets have a lot of money, so it's not the biggest deal in the world. I think this guy could really be a staple for Mets fans for a long time, especially if they can find a spot to get him in the lineup next year or in 2025. I think 2024 is more realistic to get there. But let's talk about him. He was signed in July 2018 from Venezuela for $425,000, which is 4 times more than what Ronald Acuna got. He got it for $100K, I believe, when he got signed. So he has a little bit more prospect pedigree than his brother, but at the same time, Ronald Acuna Jr. is one of the best players in baseball. There's no denying that. So what he's become, I don't know if Luisangel is going to reach those same heights, but he's still a really good player. He was instrumental in helping the Frisco Rough Riders go ahead and win the AA Texas League Championship in 2022. And he also had a really strong showing in the Arizona Fall League in 2022, and that really helped solidify his place among the upper echelon of prospects in Major League Baseball. He really put himself more so on the radar, and it helped rise himself up prospect lists to get to number 44 because of that AFL showing. The issues that he presents is that he has a very aggressive approach. He has around a 50% swing rate, which is really, really high. But on the bright side, he is great at drawing walks. He has a 9.2 walk rate, and his strikeout rate isn't super high at 18.9. The fact that he's 21 in AAA and putting up those numbers is something that is really, really promising for Mets fans. And if he can really rein in that aggressive approach, you're going to have someone who doesn't strike out a lot, who walks a ton, and also has an above-average hit tool. That is a recipe for success. Again, there is no tool that really jumps out of the page and makes you say, wow, this is going to be an elite player because of his speed, because of his hitting, because of his power, because of his defense. But he's good at everything he does. He is great at everything he does, and he projects to be really, really good at the major league level at every aspect of the game. I mean, the ability to play shortstop or center field is really tough. Those are the two hardest positions outside of catcher to play defensively. And so if you can go ahead and slot in at either of those, you are a athlete. There's no other way to put it. You are athletically gifted and can be a huge asset to a team going forward due to solely based off your versatility. Some scouts think he might end up at second base, but at the end of the day, if he could stick at center field or shortstop, or at least fill in part-time for injuries or rest days or other opportunities like that, Mets fans have a lot to be excited about. He has plus speed. You might hear some people say it's plus speed, but it's not elite. But he really is great at using that speed to his advantage on the base pass. For instance, this season he has 42 stolen bases to just 5 caught stealings, and those numbers have yielded a 5.1 weighted stolen base, which is basically the weighted runs added a player gives their team from the number of stolen bases and caught stealings they have and situational awareness of when those come during a game as well, which 5.1 is a huge number. So the fact that he's able to do that at AA at a high level of the minors, where, remember, the jump from single A to AA for a lot of people is considered the hardest besides AAA to the majors. So the fact he's been able to do that at AA is really, really impressive. It also makes sense why he was traded by the Texas Rangers. They have a very similar issue to the Mets that I had already addressed, where they have Corey Seager, they have Marcus Semien. So there's not a whole lot of space for him to go ahead and slot into the infield, and Leody Taveras isn't necessarily a superstar like Semien or Seager, but he's definitely a solid player, and I don't think he had the biggest role to play in the Texas Rangers' future. So this is a great deal for both sides, where the Mets get someone who maybe they do end up seeing him sliding into right field and covering for Mark Canha, who most likely will be gone sometime soon. Or maybe they want to move Jeff McNeil to right field, and now they have their second baseman of the future, and should something happen to Lindor, they now have someone who can play shortstop. There's a lot of options here that the Mets can go ahead and try and pursue with this, and he really has put it all together offensively this year in AA as well. It's an 830 OPS, which isn't super high, but his 121 WRC plus is definitely really encouraging. Again, he's only 21 years old, so he has a lot of time to grow and develop. He could easily make the major leagues next year. I think he will. I think he'll be a late season call-up and really help a Mets team that potentially could be making a push this year if they don't trade off too many pieces and try and retain some of the starting pitching. You know, you have Kodai Senga, who's really been dominating this year, so maybe they go ahead and just do a short-term rebuild, get rid of some of their aging talent like a Max Scherzer, maybe like a Justin Verlander, who is 40 right now. So they could potentially do a little bit of a youth movement, try and get someone in their starting rotation who's under the age of 30, which right now Senga is the youngest at 30 years old, and see what they can do from there. I wouldn't be shocked about that, and I think there's a lot of potential for them to go ahead, take Luisangel Acuña, and make their team immediately better in 2024 or for 2025. So there's a lot of potential there, and it's something Mets fans should be excited about. They got a top 50 prospect in Major League Baseball for a 38-year-old starting pitcher who's having a down year. Granted, it also included a little bit over $20 million to go and help offset some of that $43.3 million Max Scherzer is owed, but at the end of the day, to get that for what they gave up, Luisangel Acuna I think is going to be a really good player. And I think the Mets really did end up out really well in this trade, especially for a team that is kind of in a weird period where they have a lot of good players, but they might not be in a champion contending window yet. So there's a lot of interesting things that could end up happening, and I think the Mets should be happy about what ended up happening. Before I get into the trade grades, I want you to go ahead and if you do like the videos I produce, go ahead and hit that subscribe button or leave a comment down below on what your thoughts on the trade are. Do you think that Max Scherzer was too much for Luisangel Acuna? Do you think the Mets made out great? Or do you think this is exactly what the Rangers need to go ahead and make a push and lift up the World Series trophy in October? Let me know down in the comments, and if you like this content, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We're breaking down trades and reviewing prospects all the time, so go ahead and stay subscribed to stay up to date on the trade deadline as it comes and goes, and up and coming new prospects and reports on prospects that may have fallen out of grace. Without further ado, here is my trade grades for the Max Scherzer trade to the Texas Rangers. For the Texas Rangers, I give them a B+. Scherzer is a great pitcher. He's 38, and we'll get to that in a second, but he's a great addition. Lusiangel Acuna was a little bit steep for me, but at the end of the day, he is a proven pitcher. He's going to help your rotation immediately, and I think at the end of the day, he is the kind of guy that you want to have on your team to make sure that you can win a World Series. And I think Scherzer realized that he's going to have to kind of stay here because he's an old player, and he's not going to command the same money he got in free agency next season. He has the track record, but at that point, no team's going to invest that much money into his bank account, and frankly, there's not a ton of teams that have the financial ability to do so. The Mets were one of them. The Yankees, I don't think, are going to be interested in his services in free agency. They have money to spend elsewhere and really need to address their starting lineup. The Red Sox aren't in a position to go get him. And you look at the other teams that spend big. The Dodgers, maybe, but they have a lot of depth in their pitching. So I really don't think there's going to be a ton of demand for him to get anywhere close to $43 million like he has right now. At the end of the day, giving up someone who could end up being like Ozzy Albies, as for a lot of comparisons of, to a 30-year-old player isn't great. But at the same time, if he's what they need to win a World Series, then I think this is a trade they had to make at the time. I think this is a good trade for the Rangers, and it puts them in the right direction. It hurts to lose a top prospect like Luisangel Acuna, but at the end of the day, it's what they need if they want to make a playoff push, and they need to make a couple more moves, in my opinion, to really be competitive come October. But at the end of the day, this was the first step in the right direction, and I don't think they need to worry about starting pitchers anymore at the trade deadline. For the Mets, I'm going to give this a flat A. The only reason it's not an A+ is because $20 million, no matter who you are, is a lot of money. And granted, they'd have to cover that if they wanted to trade for Max Scherzer, but at the end of the day, they got it done, and they did a very good job. They were able to go, and even though Max Scherzer was stern about it, they were able to keep the return of Luisangel Acuna and not have to worry about losing out on trading Max Scherzer for a top 50 prospect. I think he absolutely stays in that discussion as a top 50 prospect once prospect lists get updated at the end of the trade deadline, and I think he's someone that Mets fans are going to see play at Citi Field sooner rather than later. He has the tools to be a great player, and frankly, they sold at the right time because right now it's looking exactly to be a seller's market. Sellers are getting big returns at the trade deadline for people like Lucas Giolito, for people like Kendall Graveman, for people like David Robertson, who many people don't think it was a big return, but I'm personally high on the return the Mets got for him. So I think this was a good trade, especially because you have a 38-year-old Max Scherzer who wasn't pitching great this year, who really isn't going to help you in the long term, and now you get a piece that could immediately help your team in 2024 as you go ahead and potentially fight for a wild card spot. It's going to be hard to beat the Braves, be difficult to go ahead and contend with the Marlins and Phillies. So I think this is a piece that is a long-term benefit versus short-term benefit. And if they're going to throw in the towel, this is a trade I absolutely would make, no hesitation. And I think the Mets are really happy about it. And I think Mets fans should also be really, really, really happy about it.